I'm ready to slash and burn.
No quarter. I am going to be uncomfortable and all over you from start to finish.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And today we have our previous guests on the show, Ricky and Courtney from Mammoth. I'm so excited to have you back and talk about Mammoth.
Excellent. Yeah.
Hey.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. World Championship VII has definitely been an interesting season. There's been a lot of, differences in some things from, maybe what BattleBots has done in the past. Luckily, one of those nice things is knowing what those matches are going to be ahead of time, plus various rule changes and things like that. But we'll kind of start off by talking about the very beginning of the season, your first match against Valkyrie, which was very interesting. There's been a lot of stick together stuff going on this season, and that was certainly one of those situations. And I think, watching that match, it seems that Lucy anticipated that might happen and was trying to avoid it, but unfortunately could not. Does that, when you have a situation where you have to do an unstick, does that interrupt the focus of the match because you kind of have to pause things and then wait for all of that to be done and then kind of get back into it?
It can, especially when you had an unstick that was as lengthy and involved as the unstick that we had, because that was almost 2 hours.
It was so long. They had 8 guys and a crowbar, and then they're like, we're gonna just get an angle grinder and cut it off. And we're like, you can't cut through this material with an angle grinder. That's not an option.
Yeah, they tried to cut through our leg on the front of Mammoth, and it's we picked these components so that they would be difficult.
Sir, this is not an option.
Yeah, right. So we unbolted that whole leg, and both robots got taken on outside. Valkyrie still had a leg sticking out of its mouth, and they unbolted the entire weapon from their robot, and we bolted on a new leg because the leg that got stuck wasn't really damaged, it was just stuck, but of course we damaged it trying to get it out of Valkyrie because they tried to cut it and that whole thing.
It looked a little wonky.
And everyone was like, yeah, fine, that's not changing the outcome, it's the same. And then
also you have to run back and forth to the pits.
Oh yeah,
because all your tools are there. You bring some tools to the battle box, just a few things in a little bag. You don't bring everything. You don't bring a spare leg that's 3 feet long.
Yeah.
If we had showed up we've got spare legs, they'd be like, why do you no, get rid of those.
It looks like you've got a bag of baguettes.
Exactly.
With legs.
You've been to the market. And I actually, Christine raised an interesting question. Had you ever anticipated Mammoth's leg getting stuck inside of Valkyrie?
Not in Valkyrie. I mean, I didn't think that there was enough room in Valkyrie for a leg to become stuck, which shows you how much flex there is, even with something as sturdy as Valkyrie and with something as big as Mammoth. The space, the leg is an inch and a half, almost 2 inches thick, plus the bolts on the end. And then the gap in Valkyrie where the leg went is a half an inch. So there was enough stretch and pull in everything that itty bitty space with a thing that was not supposed to be there.
It's when your vacuum starts sucking up stuff it shouldn't.
Yeah, it was.
You're I didn't think that was gonna go in there.
And then of course Trey comes over, and I thought the BattleBots folks were going to be very angry, and well, you've shut down production again. We seem to every year for some reason or another. Why?
For an extended period of time.
Yeah, it's never quick.
It's never quick.
And instead he comes over and he goes, "That's genius. It's perfectly sized." It's yep, I don't know whether to take credit for it or not, because if I do, then I planned this, and then I'm clearly causing this problem intentionally. And if it was just a complete accident, then I don't get to be a genius. I said nothing.
That's a smart move.
Yeah.
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 A couple days later, Trey wandered by and goes to someone else. He's like giving a tour. He's like, look at this. Look at this. See these legs? Genius.
Well, it's also funny because when we were in the pits, Valkyrie's right next to us. Like,
Yeah.
they are our direct neighbor. And it was everyone's first fight for BattleBots. And so there was a little bit like, how are you guys doing over there? You good? Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty funny because that's true. I remembered when I was walking through, you know, seeing that you were right near each other. So that's kind of amusing. Now I'm curious because I think that you maybe posted a little bit about things, what happened on social media, but do you think that then, after everything was cleared up and, you were unstuck and the fight resumed and everything, that what ended up happening to Mammoth, that was in any way caused by having to take the robot apart, or was it just something that happened?
It was all caused by having the robots stuck together. I won't say it was caused by having them apart, but Mammoth is designed with this big arm, and you can only throw another robot as hard as gravity is holding them to the ground and inertia is holding them down. So when you have one that gets lodged on your leg and is stuck like that, then you can go and hit them, and the amount of force holding them there is greater than anything that we designed for by like a wide margin. So the first thing that happened was our left gearbox just shredded itself internally because we would push down and try to hook them, and they'd flip up in the air, and that would put 600 or 700 pounds of force down on that wheel, and the wheel was spinning, like it was free spinning because it has enough power to break traction and do a little burnout, but as soon as you put 700 pounds of force on it, it stops real quick. And when you do that, I think we got like 8 or 9 hits in a row, like one after another on Valkyrie. And we did that 8 or 9 times in a row, and the gearboxes inside there just exploded. I mean, shredded themselves. Meanwhile, the whole assembly, that whole carbon fiber hub that holds the weapon together, that saw the same thing. That's supposed to be able to lift thousands of pounds, and it's supposed to be able to hit against something that weighs hundreds of pounds. But when you're stuck together, then instead of a couple of 100 pounds of robot, you might as well be lifting 5,000 pounds of robot. And to do that over and over and over again, put a bunch of cracks in everything, and it just didn't take long for those cracks to catch up. So yeah, we just never anticipated getting stuck together with someone like that, and learned all new kinds of ways to break a robot.
Because we've never had the hub fail like that.
No.
It blew my mind. I also thought it was my fault. Because I had been bolting in the panels on the weapon into the hub beforehand, and we were a little crunched for time. And I'm also like kind of short, so I can't reach. So I'm like, I'm the tallest of the short people on the team. So I'm like, on my tiptoes, cranking it in. And when you're fighting, I'm kind of far back and I'm short, so I also can't see well. And I just see it cracking apart, like right above the bolts. But I thought it was cracking like at the bolts. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But this is clearly all my fault. So that took a couple years off my life.
That and the carbon fiber dust.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, that was guaranteed. I've already accounted for that. It's in my spreadsheet.
Known issue.
Yeah.
Exactly. Tough way to start the season. But I have to say, with that Star Child match, way to bounce back. I'm sure that, even before seeing the schedule, that you may have had an inkling. Well, BattleBots has done Mammoth versus Huge before. Clearly, they're going to do Mammoth versus Star Child, because why not? So seeing that coming, but this was another match of me being like, I've never seen a robot do that before. You know, at one point they were basically riding on top of Mammoth. You know, and you love to see just like kind of that back and forth. And, you know, there was certainly a period of time where I was worried watching because, you know, Mammoth was down and having trouble self-righting, and you were able to get back up and then go through, finish the match, and just like the emotion afterwards. And I could tell how excited you were for, you know, just to see your robot perform that way, especially after what happened in the first one. So, you know, kind of talk about that one.
Well, after that gearbox problem in the first fight, we panicked a lot. We went to absolutely ridiculous extreme lengths to like rebuild and redesign those gearboxes. And we were heat treating components in a parking lot with peanut oil that we got from Walmart, and just completely pulling out all the stops to make sure that the drive system wasn't going to fail again. I think we also turned down the power a little bit just in case. So we, all of us just wanted the robot to work the way it was supposed to. That was the biggest thing. You know, we spent all this time. The bones for Mammoth were really good this year. You know, even in the Valkyrie fight, when things didn't go well, the robot performed really well. We looked and said, you know, if we had figured out our dumb mistakes before the fight started and just tweaked those, like the design that we showed up with was really did what we wanted it to do. And then going into the Starchild fight, and not only did the robot perform the way it wanted to do, but I drove well, and Cody, who's our new weapon operator, he did fantastic. Like that was his second time operating the weapon on the robot. Well, second time operating it against anything. And yeah, just it was that when a plan comes together moment.
Yeah.
So and it is nice fighting something like Starchild because we can remove the things that we've added for you know, the more meta robots, and just lean into Mammoth doing Mammoth things and have a good time. We did consider, you'll notice there were still flips and things, but there were fewer flips than there were in the huge fight. And we thought about, do we want to make the robot more floppy just so we can do a few more flips? Because we can do that. We can swap out certain parts and the whole thing gets more springy and wonky. Or we can go the other way and make it less like the huge fight and make everything very rigid. So we just throw Starchild, you know, 10, 20 feet up in the air kind of thing. But if you make it too floppy, then you never actually like show dominance on the other robot, and it gets difficult to throw them around. And if you make it too stiff, well, we were terrified that the Valkyrie problem was going to happen again and the whole hub was going to explode, even though we don't have good reason to think. But you know, you see it happen once and you start to get nervous.
Yeah. And we don't have a lot of spare hubs.
No, those hubs are one of the most expensive parts in all of BattleBots.
Yeah.
So,
like when that thing crumbled, my heart crumbled.
Right.
I was so upset.
It's like 14 carbon fiber pieces that are handmade by this wonderful company that we have, Common Fibers.
Yeah.
And then they lay them up and glue them together, and
then their dog mails them.
Yeah, we have a great video of their dog rushing to mail these at like, you know, 11 o'clock p.m. for an overnight delivery. We
were like stressing. We were like, we don't know if they're going to get here. And they were so kind. The man was like, listen, I will get on a flight with this thing and I will fly it from like, I guess where are they? Seattle.
Yeah.
Seattle to Las Vegas.
Like you can meet me at the airport.
I will be there with it in a suitcase. We were like, we love you.
Yeah. So yeah, it just and they're really neat parts, but we had to be more careful with how we use them because they're incredibly strong, but they well, they weren't built for the Valkyrie fight, was really the end of the story. And it's not that there was a problem with the part in that fight. Like later on, without getting into too many spoilers, we have a fight where the hub takes a direct hit, like there's a big chunk out of it, and it's fine. But yeah, not used to hitting a robot that's physically attached to Mammoth.
Yeah, because we've never really worried like, oh, what about the hub before?
Yeah, you're like, it's up there.
It's
out of the way.
fine.
It's good.
Whatever.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you were saying about, like throwing Star Child around, but I'm fairly certain that if you had thrown Star Child 10 to 20 feet in the air and broken the battle box, I think that Greg and Trey may have been a little bit upset about
like that.
They would have gone nuts. And it's this eternal.
No, you know who would have cried? The lighting people.
The lighting,
the poor lighting crew.
The lighting people are the only people left that don't hate us.
No, I think we're good with audio.
Yeah, it's
after
true.
we got rid of the vuvuzelas.
Yeah, after
that first year they were like, that needs to go. No,
it's always a balance with Mammoth because we could try harder to make it do stupid things, make it do amazing things like 5% of the time. And then the more we try hard to make those things happen, the more likely it is that the whole robot's going to like explode and not work. And it's this really painful balance of trying to make it competitive while also letting it do absolutely ridiculous things. And I think we struck the right balance in the Star Child fight. And it is a learned skill.
Yes, I would imagine so. Now, like as you mentioned with the later fights, we can't get into details on what happened, but I'm really curious as to what your thoughts were like knowing that you were going to have those matchups, because Death Roll and Kraken, Mammoth never faced either of those robots, which I'm really surprised about Kraken, because I mean, you've both been around a while and you would think that you would have fought at some point and haven't, but of course this is a different Kraken than what we've seen in the past. So, it would be a different strategy either way. But what did you think about those two matches?
Well, I've wanted to fight Kraken in the battle box since the beginning. I always thought that, especially with their older design, the big teeth on the front would be a wonderful thing to just hook and lift up into the air and, give them a piggyback ride. And we did fight Kraken once in Orlando. Not in the battle box. Of course, that was a very different Mammoth and a very different Kraken and everything. But it was, a fun fight. And we did win. It was nice.
Go team.
Yeah, only to be defeated by Blue later, but that was okay.
Comes the breaks.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a fight that we really wanted to do for a long time. And
Matt has also wanted to fight you for a long time.
Yep, and Matt has always been great, as far as I know. I mean, maybe he was a real jerk of a little kid. I kind of got that. He's been great. He's been great the entire time we've known him. And so I was really excited for that. Death Roll I was excited for too. I was like, that's a robot. That is a vertical spinner that I think we can take on well. They have a big weapon, and big spinning weapons are something that we usually feel like we can do pretty well against, because we have we're one of the few robots that can outreach those kind of robots. And we can put on an extra durable tip to our big weapon arm and just kind of smack them before they get used to it. And those kind of robots aren't used to having to deal with that. And anytime we can put an opponent on their back foot strategically, it works out well. Or it works out better, I should say, than if it's a robot that has practice against something like Mammoth, or has a strategy that doesn't change fighting Mammoth. So yeah, we were excited with the whole lineup, honestly. And I'd been wanting to fight Valkyrie for a long time too. So of course I hadn't been wanting to fight Star Child, because Star Child wasn't around previously, so that was not as much. But
we did go going into BattleBots knowing that Star Child was going to be there. Remember, I was having a conversation several times before we left, who do we think we're going to fight? And you're like, definitely Star Child. Every time we were kicking around ideas about possible fights. And honestly, at this point, I was like, maybe we're just never going to fight Kraken again. Because there are some things that BattleBots, it's not in the cards for whatever reason.
Yeah, it is strange how sometimes there's some years where someone, it just feels like there's a shadow edict not to allow two robots to fight. And I'm sure it's just chance, but it is funny how that works out.
Yeah, and it's funny to me too, because I'm sure that the BattleBots folks probably don't care very much about Pokemon, but for me, Kraken and Mammoth have always been the most Pokemon of robots, and so
I love that. That's so cute.
I was excited. I was so excited to see that happen. I almost wish I could go back in time and be like, you guys need to get Pokeballs and like bring them out and be like, Mammoth, I choose you. Like that would have been very entertaining. But yeah,
I just want a chance to turn my baseball cap backwards just before I hit the button. That's what it's all about.
Next season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was definitely an exciting lineup. I'm obviously excited to see how it plays out because as I've repeatedly said, I know what ultimately happens in the season, but I wasn't there for any of the fight nights, so I really don't know. This is all surprises to me. So I'm excited about that. Now, something else that Mammoth has been involved in related to BattleBots is the Destruct-A-Thon. And I'm curious from your perspective, like, number one, I would think that it would definitely have to be an honor to be asked to do it, to say that like Mammoth is one of the iconic BattleBots that people want to come see and like, to get that in the first place. But then probably the stress of having to do something that you don't normally have to do as far as making sure that you're keeping up with the parts and whatever else is needed to kind of continue throughout this process. So tell me a little bit about that experience for you.
Well, you nailed it with the feeling like an honor. It was pretty cool that we were on the short list there and fairly early on the short list. And if I want to talk myself out of the honor side of it, then it makes sense for Mammoth to be there, right? It's
we're on the building.
Yeah, we're on the building. It's very convenient. We got.
You can see this robot up there fight.
Yeah, that one in there right now,
right inside.
Yeah, tickets. Here you go. It's also, we're a big robot that throws other people around. We are relatively cheap compared to a lot of builds. Although we're also high labor, which I don't think they understood quite as much in the beginning. And we, throwing other robots around and putting on a good show and throwing ourselves around doesn't necessarily mean that you have to build a new robot after every fight. So that works out really well too. And we're also a team that, generally speaking, has pulled out a lot of good build victories in short periods of time and things. And I think that gave them some confidence that we'd be able to deliver some good robots for their purposes. It also is a lot. I mean, the robot is, it shares some parts with the TV show robot, but it is really redesigned in a lot of ways. It weighs almost 100 pounds more. All the stuff that it's okay for me to tell my team to go fix after every fight, you can't do that at Destruct-A-Thon. You have to have a robot that's ready to fight with, limited repairs. So there's a lot of things that used to be 1/10 of an inch thick that are, 3/8 of an inch thick instead now, or that kind of thing. There's a lot of parts that used to be titanium and aluminum, and now they're, armor resist or abrasion resistant steel. So there's a lot of changes that got made and a lot of testing that we had to do to make sure that those changes were going to be okay. But I think we're in a pretty good spot as far as what the design is and how it's going to do at Destruct-A-Thon. If we could only get all of our parts in a timely manner, then everything would have been great. But unfortunately, there were so many things this year that were just not available, plain and simple, and then we had to redesign, in the 11th hour to get something else. We even had parts that we had orders in for, paid and ready to go, and it wasn't until they went to ship them that they said, actually, we don't have any of this stuff. Here's your money back.
We have something that's like very similar on paper, but when you actually like want to use that piece of equipment, it's completely different than what you really want.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it has been a real trial. Plus we moved shops for the fourth time in 4 years. Yeah, we've had a different shop for every Mammoth build.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the original Maker Faire Mammoth and the original TV show Mammoth in 2019 were in the same spot.
Yeah, the makerspace.
But that, yeah.
But we also, like, Mammoth is not a year-round thing. So usually we're kind of like, you know, go into a shop for however long we have to build. And then we leave a little bit of something there because where are we going to put all this stuff? But then typically we kind of like move out with all of our stuff. And then it's like, oh, BattleBots is going to happen again soon. Where are we going to build this thing? Because then someone else has come in and taken that space.
And that wouldn't normally be so bad, except that this time it wasn't an expected thing. We figured we'd come back from filming this year in October and just go right back into finishing up the live show robots, and nope. We went right back into searching for a new place to build for a month, but we got it done, and the robots are going to be great in person, so we're excited. And some of the other robots have been really neat to see, and really are. In the back of my head, I had a little bit of a worry that these robots were going to be pulling punches, and they really don't. I mean, these are real robot fights that are happening. Maybe more real than they ought to be, frankly. Until they can figure out how to fix them, maybe I'd not do the extra glory kill right at the end. But
because the thing that I find so fascinating is the people repairing the robots are not regular team members. You know, none of the captains and their teams are out there like on a regular basis fixing these. They drop them off, and it's like sending your kid to college. You're like, good luck, don't mess up. And it's, you know, we're all used to like Ricky designing things, and then we're like, oh, well, I guess we're gonna have to just do that now, aren't we, Ricky? Like when you put those screws in that weird place last year, like not the most recent season,
the ones where we had to buy 2 different special tools in order to access those screws.
Yeah, we were mad about that. He was like, I made it really accessible this time, you guys. And we're like, no, you didn't.
Everything is physically possible to do, but that's
right. If we had like tiny little child hands, it would have been fine.
Right.
But there are no 5-year-olds on the team.
Right.
So
yeah.
So you've got, you know, complete strangers. You have to, you know, design for that, because with a lot of BattleBots designs, there's a certain level of like, oh, we're just gonna do this and it'll be fine. We'll put up with it because it's not like something you're using every day. But now they have something that they're using 5 nights a week.
Right.
And then you also have the fact that other people are driving it.
Yeah.
And, like,
and Mammoth is tough to drive to start with. So we definitely had to tone it down a lot there, because it's a big drifty boy. And I keep getting comments. It's weird. They're like, you know, there's no way Mammoth is going to win this. They're just too big and slow. And it's like, Mammoth is, depending on the year, the fastest robot at BattleBots, or one of the fastest robots at BattleBots. But it's so big, like you'd never know, because it just doesn't look fast when something big is moving. But we've had, you know, 1 second or less box rushes multiple times. Now, granted, we're halfway across the arena anyway when we start, so there's that, I guess. But still, like, you know, it's tricky to handle that, especially when you're that big and you've got dangly, pointy, hooky things coming off every which way that could get caught up on something. So
when you're a big spinny flippy boy,
yeah, and we've seen what happens when the big spinny flippy boy gets a big skinny flip into a wall and self-destructs.
Yes.
Sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had some moments too. That I don't know if that's been on TV yet. We had some out of the arena self-destruction later in the season too, which I think gets a little vignette of a feature kind of deal later, maybe. But it is really easy, if you are not experienced, to accidentally cause Mammoth to just foil like a fish out of water.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, it has to be weird for you though. I mean, you know, as somebody who has had this robot for so many years to have someone else that isn't you operating it. You know, it's part of the game, obviously, with the Destruct-A-Thon. I mean, the builders realistically can't be there for every match, I would imagine, but you know, that has to be kind of unusual.
Yeah, it's a strange feeling because it's weird for me if someone else on the team drives it. Although it's like we tried really hard when the robot was first built, and I tried to get other people to drive it and get practice just in case I couldn't. Of course, I had my hand injury that first year, so it would have been nice if other people had done it. And you know, we did like a little driving test of sorts, and nobody was going to be able to parallel park Mammoth. Like even me just doing it one-handed went so much easier than other people just trying to like move it from there to there. Especially because the design of Mammoth has changed over the years. We used to have what's called toe out in cars, but the wheels used to go like this. Now, you know, now they're parallel like most robots, but originally they went like this. And that gave us some really neat driving abilities, but it also makes it just driving like you're on a sheet of ice and you had too many cocktails beforehand. It's without a lot of practice driving a robot that was set up like that, you just weren't going to be able to do it effectively. So it was one of the things we thought about, like, yeah, we could have made the robot cheaper and smaller and lighter and stuff, not smaller, cheaper and simpler and lighter for the Destruct-A-Thon if we went back to wheels that were like this. I was like, there's no way any of the folks there are going to be able to drive this, you know, in a couple of weeks of practice, let alone a couple of nights.
Yeah.
So it just took it off the table.
Yeah. Now I'm kind of curious because, you know, we obviously don't know for sure when World Championship VIII filming is going to be, but I mean, you know, right now it looks like it's very likely that it could be in the summer, which is a little bit different, you know, shorter turnaround time. But the fact that you're doing the Destruct-A-Thon and kind of having to work on the robot in the months leading up to that, do you think that that gives you like an advantage because you're actively working on it, or is it harder because you're not like really getting a break?
Definitely harder because we're not getting a break. Although I am excited to see there are a couple things that we tried out for the Destruct-A-Thon that I want to see how they work. You know, they're new engineering approaches. They're limited. You know, we wanted to make sure we gave something to BattleBots that was reliable and tested and easy to repair. But there were a few things where I said, well, you know, this is cheaper, or this is easier, or this is more straightforward to repair. Let's try that out. And it'll work well for Destruct-A-Thon either way. If it works well for Destruct-A-Thon in the ways I hope it does, then maybe we do that on the TV show too. So it's a way to have a test bed without me having to, you know, spend a season at BattleBots seeing if it works in the arena. And that's wonderful. It also opens up the idea that we could take Mammoth revisions there before filming and see how they perform in fights, you know, before the season starts. And that hopefully will be nice. I don't know if that would happen if we have to film in the summer, but you know, if it turns into a winter filming or something, then maybe we could do a trip out and do some testing and that sort of thing.
Yes, because as we all know, testing is critical, and most people don't really have the ability to do that readily outside of being in the BattleBox arena.
Right. And Mammoth is a little lucky in that we can do a good bit of testing, you know, in parking lots because we're not hitting something at 200 miles an hour. You know, we can get 50, 60 feet away and hit a washing machine or whatever, but it still doesn't change the fact that having something, you know, having another robot drive at you at 20 miles an hour is a whole different experience than having something sit and wait for you to throw them, you know, on a pair of cinder blocks. So yeah, it would be really nice to have that practice arena and practice stage. And frankly, that was one of the things that we just needed to do more of with this year's robot to prevent the Valkyrie situation, is if we had just gotten as much testing in. But the last 2022 and 2023 both, or I guess 2021 and 2022, the last two seasons have just been really bad as far as how quickly we got our materials in, the build windows we had, and how long we had to test. So all that considered, pretty darn pleased, but definitely a lot of extra stressor. And I'd love a year where we just have everything we want up front and feel like we can not have to fight through this mire of we don't have what we want. What do we do with what we have?
Yeah. Because with the build this year, with all the supply chain issues throughout the country, we started building in August, and then we shipped, early October, middle of October. And it seemed like every week I would get a call from you and be like, hey, so I can't get such and such anymore. And I'd be like, what do you mean? And he was like, it's just, there's none in the entire country to buy. I'd be like, how is that possible? It's a very large country.
We bought all of the Tegris in the country at one point.
It was the best.
We bought all of the go-kart tires that we use on Mammoth. We bought all of them that exist. We bought all of the wheels that go inside those tires. We bought all of the sprockets that are behind the eyeballs on the weapon system. Like it goes down the list of like, we scraped so many barrels. We had to find new barrels to scrape. Even the tubing that the steel tubing that goes into the robot, that's normally like an off-the-shelf item. You can go anywhere and get it. And for some, it's not all the same thickness tubing. Some places it's stronger than others. And we had to go to like, I think I went to 20 different shops to find one that was able to mail it to the place that we have that cuts the tubes.
Yeah.
So just a nightmare. And I'm hoping that gets fixed by next year. But I think the moral of the story is get the parts ahead of time. When you don't know when the thing is going to film, Mammoth is a big robot. I can't have all of these parts sit around for longer than they should, because you gotta have a place to put them. And I still have 4 other Mammoths from previous years that are just like lurking in the darkness, waiting for me to.
I used one the other day to help me put together the new workbench. I would prop up the parts on the Mammoth, and she would just hold them and help. It was great.
Yeah.
You got to work with it.
We're finding so many other uses for the robots lately.
It's great. I wish I could take it grocery shopping or something. Like just running errands with Mammoth.
There you go.
It would carry so much, Ricky.
We've been talking about doing that as a promo for Zometry.
Really?
Yeah. No, we really have. We want to have a nice advertising spot where Mammoth goes about her day.
That's so wholesome. She goes to the park.
Gets her nails did.
Ooh, cute.
I'd watch that.
Zoe did paint Mammoth's nails this year while we were waiting in the pits. And I think it was towards the end of filming when it's like a little bit more spaced out, where it's like, the beginning is so chaotic. And at the end, you have time, thank God, to take a Sharpie and paint your robot's nails bright pink or bright red. So thank God for that time. Because what would we do without that?
She fancy.
And like that's a perfect segue, because speaking of Zoe, that segues into talking about Norwalk, because I love that this season, for me, like Norwalk and BattleBots are more integrated than I think that they've ever been. Chris and Kenny even brought up NHRL in the last episode, and then showed footage and everything else like that, and I was like, this is awesome, because I just, recently kind of got introduced to Norwalk not that long ago. Didn't even know it was a thing, because I've watched BattleBots for 20 years, and of course I know a lot about BattleBots, but I'm like, oh, this is something else, and this is very entertaining. I love the juxtaposition of those who kind of use Norwalk as a proving ground to potentially scale up to other bots. And of course, there's a lot of folks that just go there because they love to build small robots, and that's really all that they're interested in doing. what do you find exciting about that, to kind of see a little bit more of that integration? Because I think it's just good for the sport.
Yeah, I think we need to get to a point where it's wonderful that BattleBots has been around and has been kind of the central hub of robot combat and the top of the top. But if you don't have I'm not great with other sports analogies, but if you don't have, Pee-wee football, then you don't have, an NFL. And not to say that Norwalk is Pee-wee football or that BattleBots is Pee-wee football or either particular way, but you need to have not just different levels of competition, but you need to have different ways to experience them. I mean, not everyone is going to be able to raise the money to build a heavyweight robot. And on the flip side, not everyone is going to be able to justify the time and energy in a smaller robot if it doesn't have the glory and razzmatazz of BattleBots. So there's a place for both, and I'd love to see one or two more competing competitions that are not just competitions, because we have, thankfully, probably hundreds, but at least dozens of competitions all over the country for fighting robots. But something that turns it into a real competitive space, a real media event that people can watch and get excited about and experience in a professionally produced kind of way. And I think all of that just kind of helps to build the sport and get people interested and get people learning about robots.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, like, obviously there's a lot of smaller competitions, or bigger competitions. I mean, Motorama is going on right now, as we speak. But I think that, Norwalk in particular has really kind of nailed the blend of having really great like production value and entertainment and kind of what they're doing, and Ricky, you're certainly a part of that. I know I always look forward to seeing you when you're commentating on the show there, but also making something that is very accessible for people to get into, that have no building experience, that just say, I want to try and build a robot and put something together and, make something great. I'm sure, I always say Tom's probably never going to get tired of me bringing him up on the show, but Tom Farkas, built Positively Hysterical, which is like, I love that robot so much. It just makes me happy. And, he's somebody who came in, really no building experience, using cutting boards to put together a robot. And now he has this robot that everybody loves so much. And I think that that's something that I just love about Norwalk is, that people can come in and do something like that.
Cutting boards are a very legit material. Our first year at BattleBots, we what was the Faraday cage effect, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah, with would you want to explain it? Explanation than me.
We showed up and we had these neat panels on Mammoth that were made of carbon fiber sandwiched around balsa wood, and that covered our little electronics boxes on the bottom of the robot. Well, carbon fiber's really bad if you've got the kind of transmitters and receivers that robots do. Like you got to keep them separated, or you just have no signal that gets through. There's this Faraday cage effect. And we had no idea what to do, and we sent Courtney off to a restaurant supply store, and she got a bunch of brown cutting boards
for bread.
Yeah,
but they're plastic, and food is color coded in lots of restaurants. And originally we were like, we'll just go to Target or Walmart and get a couple, but they're not going to be thick enough. And I was like, no, we're going to go to a restaurant supply store. And it was great. And I waited for the truck to show up, and I was like, give me 12. Thank you, goodbye.
This lady's cutting a lot of bread. Okay.
Like, why do you need only brown bread cutting boards? And I was like, it's for my robot, guys. And they're like, yes, of course it is.
Give the crazy lady her merchandise and escort her to the door.
Well, Bryce also sent me one year we were trying to finish the flamethrower. And what did he want? He wanted a a butane thing that would fit in a certain diameter of tube.
Yeah.
So I kept having to go around to places in, you know, Long Beach and be like, hey, this is not creepy. It's totally for a robot. It's fine. Do you have butane that will fit in this tube for me? They're like, no, leave. Ma'am, no.
I think the lesson here is that anything can be robot making material if you try hard enough.
Yes.
If you're brave enough.
Yeah.
If
First year BattleBots, there was a lot of weird shopping because you also, it's like your first year, so you don't know what to bring. You don't know what you need more of. Even if you had like a dream shopping list that like the top couple robots put together, you would still show up and need weird little things for your robot that no one else had anticipated.
Yeah.
So is it sometimes one of those situations where you go to Walmart and put everything on the belt and the cashier looks at you like what are you doing with all of that?
We've had a lot of those.
Yeah, about every other night, I'd say.
Yeah, and inside and outside of BattleBots, I think that just describes a lot of builders' lives.
Yeah, I feel like that's a thing with just the personality types that show up at BattleBots.
That makes a lot of sense, and this is why these are my people. So yeah, I'm excited about the rest of the season, and you know, everything else to come. But you know, Mammoth looked great in that last match, and I'm excited to see more.
Thanks. Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Yes, absolutely. So everyone watching, of course, as you know, like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Keep supporting combat robotics, and I'll see everybody next time on the show.
See y'all next time.
Awesome. Bye. Thank you.